I never imagined being told by my parents, who adore my genius sister, that I was no longer needed. Having one child is enough. We don't need a failure like you. Sandy needs a lot of money to bloom her talents, so if you can pay the monthly rent of $1,000, we might reconsider. My parents decided to kick me out of the house while I was still young. My uncle reached out to help me, unable to hide my confusion. Though I'm poor, if you don't mind, Emily, I'd really like to be your parent, he said. I immediately accepted his offer. My name is Emily. I am now 30 years old, but my life has a complex background. Before talking about my family environment, please listen to my story. I was born to a typical salaryman father and a stay-at-home mother. We lived with my grandparents in my father's family home, where my unmarried uncle also lived. I started living with my uncle when I was 4 years old. He was 24 at the time. Living at home at that age might not be so unusual. However, my uncle had special circumstances that kept him from leaving home. He had been frail since childhood and continued to have health problems as an adult, making it difficult for him to hold a steady job, so he ended up living a life of irregular part-time work. Working just a few hours a few days a week was not enough income to live on his own. Perhaps feeling inferior because he was dependent on his parents, my uncle always looked guilty. I frequently witnessed my father yelling at my uncle, "You really are a burden." Such incidents were limited to when my grandparents were not around. My grandparents loved both their healthy son and their frail son without discrimination. With decreased income due to the recession and being forced to live together, my father seemed to want to behave modestly in front of his parents. However, in places where they were absent, my father was always harsh, contemptuous, and mocking toward my uncle. Seeing this, my uncle would just look sad, never getting angry or talking back. "Why don't you get angry?" I once asked innocently as a child. With a puzzled look, my uncle replied, "Because I really am receiving support from my parents." As a child, I accepted that reasoning, but as an adult, I think my father is receiving the same support, so he has no right to criticize. If I had understood that at the time, I would have supported my uncle. Unable to grasp it as a child, I felt uncomfortable when my father raised his voice at my uncle but couldn't speak up. It's true that the atmosphere was peaceful when my grandparents were around. Under their watch, my uncle would smile gently, and my father would hide his emotions and behave accordingly. My mother was too busy caring for my young sister and me to pay attention to the relationship between my father and my uncle. As a child, I believed these days would last forever. However, our everyday life changed unexpectedly. My grandparents died in an accident. I was 6 years old at the time. My sister and I cried bitterly, overwhelmed by deep sadness and loneliness. I clearly remember my uncle also quietly shedding tears. But what I can't forget is my father's laughter. Yes, he was laughing. Despite the death of his own parents, he never cried. Not when we rushed to the hospital, not while preparing for the funeral. It wasn't just that he was composed, it was clear to me, even as a child, that my father was not grieving. And that conviction only grew stronger. On the day of the funeral, my father was laughing secretly, thinking no one was watching. I happened to see his face in a moment, and I clearly caught his expression. It wasn't a laugh born of sadness or confusion, but a smile of genuine joy, the kind of happiness I, as his daughter, recognized. My father was inwardly pleased with the death of my grandparents. He was probably considering various financial benefits. That smile was very unpleasant, and it felt terrifying to me as a child, making me cry. Perhaps it was taken as tears for the death of my grandparents. At that moment, my uncle put his hand on my shoulder and gently stroked it with a tender gesture. My eyes were red with tears, but my uncle's eyes, while filled with sadness, watched over me with warmth. Why was this so? Despite being blood brothers, my father and uncle had completely different reactions to our parents' death. At that time, my suspicions about my father deepened. Afterwards, my father's behavior changed significantly. His attitude towards my uncle became noticeably colder, and he would say things like, "Why should I have to take care of a useless person like you? You should be grateful just to be allowed to live here," he also said. "If you can't even pay rent, I should take all the inheritance," he declared. I didn't understand it at the time, but these statements were clearly unfair. Legally, the inheritance should be equally divided between siblings, but my father tried to monopolize it. My uncle had the strength to stand up to him and could have resorted to legal action if necessary. However, my uncle chose not to do so. While showing a saddened face, he didn't argue back or claim his share of the inheritance. Worried about my uncle, who seemed to have lost his will, I asked, "Are you okay?" To which he replied weakly, with a smile, "I'm frail and things aren't going well with my job, so it can't be helped." Day after day of verbal abuse from my father worsened my uncle's frail condition, leading to weight loss and a pale complexion. Despite this, my uncle always told me not to worry, smiling at me. However, 3 months after my grandparents passed away, my uncle was ultimately driven out of the house. "You're useless. Get out," my father said, and without saying or doing anything, my uncle left. "Uncle, don't go," I pleaded in despair, tugging at his arm, but he gently removed his hand from mine, placed it on my shoulder, and said, "Don't worry. Emily, you're strong, you'll be okay even without me." "But I'm worried about you," I replied. I was worried about my uncle, who was not healthy and couldn't hold a regular job, having to live on his own. As I looked at him with tears in my eyes, he said, "It's okay," and left. The farewell from my uncle was deeply saddening, but there was nothing a young child like me could do. Furthermore, I myself was soon in a situation where I couldn't afford to worry about others. 2 years after my grandparents passed away, the 8-year-old me was attending elementary school regularly, and my 6-year-old sister Sandy was about to enter elementary school as well. It all started when my mother mentioned that Sandy had been praised for being very smart in kindergarten. "This intelligence must definitely be inherited from me," my father exclaimed excitedly, and impulsively decided to have her take an IQ test. We were all astounded by the results. An IQ of 150. This is my DNA. The impressive number IQ 150 was displayed. Although I couldn't fully comprehend what made this so incredible, I understood that my sister was exceptionally gifted. "That's amazing, Sandy." He. "Thank you, big sis." When I casually praised her, she smiled joyfully. Those were truly happy times. But that was as good as it got. The developments that followed were the worst. "All right, let's have her take entrance exams," my father decided. So soon. My mother was surprised, but she was pushed by my father's unfounded confidence that if she's talented, it will be fine, and she got excited too. From then on, my sister began attending tutoring every day. Since my mother accompanied her, household chores were often neglected. As a result, the responsibility was shifted to me. "Since your mother and Sandy are busy, you'll take care of the house," I was commanded. Thus, doing laundry and cleaning became part of my daily routine. After school, I had no time to play. I had to go straight home and finish the chores, or I would be scolded by my parents. Days began to appear where I would skip meals because I hadn't done the chores. "You're a failure, we can't spare time for you," I was scolded. "Why can't you get perfect scores?" was a routine scolding from my father for my grades in the 90s. "Really, can't you be a bit more like your sister?" my mother said. Even if I scored high on tests or came out on top at sports day, my parents neither praised me nor paid attention to me. I was just continually ignored. "Be like your sister, Sandy," was like a mechanical repetition. Moreover, they would add condescending words such as, "It's impossible for you, but Sandy is a genius. You're just incompetent." Sandy indeed had talent, and she made remarkable progress in a short time at tutoring, quickly passing the entrance exams. As a result, my parents became even colder towards me. They spared no expense on Sandy. I couldn't get new clothes and had to make do with ones that had become too small. Sandy could enjoy delicious meals. I got leftovers. Sandy was taken on trips. I had to stay home and watch the house. My parents clearly favored only Sandy. "This child has a promising future. She'll secure our old age," my father boasted. Should we make her a doctor, or perhaps a lawyer? Becoming a politician wouldn't be bad either, my mother pondered. "We're really lucky to have such a talented daughter," my father said proudly. My existence went unnoticed by my parents, and me, crying behind Sandy, continued to be overlooked. Then, when I was 10 years old, my parents made a cold declaration. "One child is enough. We don't need a failure like you. Sandy needs a lot of money to bloom her talents, so if you can pay the monthly rent of $1,000, we might reconsider," they said. What I was bewildered. "We're saying that one child, Sandy, is enough," my father continued. "That's impossible. What am I supposed to do alone?" I said. "Why don't you try contacting your uncle for now? We'll give you some pocket money. Figure it out on your own," they said, handing me a little bit of money, and I was driven out of the house. I cried and banged on the front door, asking to be let back in, but there was no response. The door remained closed. In despair, I headed to the station. Even at the age of 10, I had the necessary knowledge and could take the train. I asked people for directions and finally arrived at the apartment where my uncle lived. When the bell rang, my uncle came out, showing the same kind face as always. He looked surprised but invited me inside, and when I explained the situation, my uncle showed his anger. "What are they doing?" my uncle exclaimed. I wasn't being scolded myself, but I was tormented by guilt for being forced out. Not knowing what to do next, tears welled up in my eyes. At that moment, as I looked down, my uncle gently placed his hand on my head. That hand, memorable for its size and warmth, was full of compassion. "It must have been hard, but don't worry anymore," my uncle said. "But what should I do now? As you see, I'm prone to illness and have little income, so I'm poor," my uncle said with a wry smile as he looked at me. Although we had lived apart for a while, my uncle's expression had grown much stronger than before. Perhaps there had been some change in his feelings due to the distance from my father. Looking directly at me, my uncle said with a smile, "I'm poor, but if you don't mind, Emily, I really want to be your parent. I'd like to become your foster father. I might not be very reliable, though." Before he finished speaking, I had already jumped into my uncle's broad chest. It was similar to my father's, yet entirely different. That chest gave me a great sense of security. "You don't have to worry about anything anymore." Hearing that, I cried with relief, and my uncle gently stroked my back, comforting me. It felt like he was treating me with the deep love of a real parent. After that, I was raised by my uncle. As my uncle was indeed poor and often ill, life with him was not straightforward. However, there were always smiles in our home, and the laughter that I had forgotten while living with my parents returned in abundance with my uncle. It was a poor yet warm household indeed. My uncle continued to give me boundless love. With deep gratitude in my heart, I lived each day to the fullest. Whenever I tried hard, my uncle always praised me. Even if the results weren't great, he valued the effort itself. Encouraged by this, I worked even harder. Gradually, I began to forget about my parents who had never praised me. I grew up healthy under my uncle's care, and before I knew it, 20 years had passed. I am now already 30 years old. And now, there is a familiar face in front of me. Dad, Mom. "It's been a while, Emily. Have you been well?" my father says with a smile, fading from my distant memories. My eyes, directed at my father, who has aged significantly and whose hair has thinned, show undisguised coldness. And for good reason. It's a "what do you want now" kind of situation. Unperturbed by my icy gaze, my father suggests, "Well, let's let bygones be bygones and get along as a family from now on." My reaction is predictable. What are you talking about? Get along as a family? You must be joking. Figures. A failure always has a bad attitude. Can't be helped. Maybe it's time to re-educate you. That's enough. Please go back home. I firmly stopped my father as he tried to enter the apartment. At that moment, my mother joined in, fueling the conflict. "Emily, don't be stubborn and accept our help. You surely can't be happy living in such a run-down apartment," my mother blurted out. You have nothing to do with this. Please leave. No need to be so haughty. Come on, let us in. No, just go home. Let us in. Go home. Even though they've aged, they pushed with more strength than I expected. Maybe it's because there were two of them, which made it hard for me to push back. We kept shoving each other like kids playing push and shove, but I managed to stay calm until the moment my father tried to step over the threshold. That's when I gave them a hard push back. Who? Ah. The force sent both my parents tumbling onto the ground, landing on their backsides. I ended up standing above them, looking down. Ugh, you're so annoying. What did you just say? I'm busy, so can you just leave already? What kind of way is that to talk? How do you even see us as your parents? I haven't considered you my parents since the moment you threw me away. But we took care of you until you were 10. Until 10, huh? If there's any time I can say I was actually taken care of, it was only when my grandparents were around. Yet you survived, didn't you? That doesn't give you the right to act all high and mighty. As they struggled to stand up while holding their backs, my parents looked much smaller. Even though they're in their 50s, they already seem like they're in their 60s or 70s. You're the ones who said it yourselves, didn't you? That Sandy was enough. With your genius daughter, there's no reason for you to come see me now. Well, it's not so simple anymore. At my words, my father grimaced and responded in an irritated tone. Did something happen to Sandy? What? Did she end up in need or something? She became a lawyer. Well then, there's no problem, right? That's amazing, just what you'd expect from someone with an IQ of 150. Oh, or so we thought, until she suddenly disappeared. That's quite surprising. As I listened further, it turned out that Sandy had successfully graduated from law school, went to grad school, took the bar exam, and although she didn't pass on her first try, she eventually did and became a fully licensed lawyer after her training. So why would she go missing after all that? She left a note saying, "I won't be taking care of you two," and then she just vanished. That's a tough situation. So in short, she's abandoned you. Congratulations. There's nothing to celebrate. That ungrateful child, after all we did to raise her, this is how she repays us. Well, I guess that's what happens when true love is lacking. While my parents may have showered my sister with excessive attention, it likely felt like nothing more than suffocating control to her. Parents who change their behavior based on an IQ score. Parents who burden their children with unrealistic expectations. Parents who disguise their selfish desires as affection. It's no wonder my sister grew fed up with that environment. Actually, the company went under. Well, given the times, that's not surprising. We barely got any severance pay, and the unemployment benefits are about to run out. That's great news. It's not great at all. It's hard enough trying to find a new job at our age. That sounds rough. Their obvious frustration only made me smirk with disinterest. That's why we want you to take care of us. The sudden demand wiped the smile off my face. No. What did you say? How can you just abandon your parents like that? The only real parent I have is my uncle, who has taken care of me since I was 10. What? My response left my father speechless. You knew I was living with my uncle when you came to this apartment, didn't you? So why are you acting surprised now? Do you really think of him as your father? My uncle, who gave me genuine love, is my true father. My words, which implied that parents who don't show love aren't parents, left my parents with stunned expressions. Even though he was sick and weak, my uncle still worked hard to support me. I wanted to repay his efforts, so I worked hard too. Wait, does that mean you actually have a proper job? Well, kind of. As I shrugged, my father suddenly grabbed my shoulder tightly. Let go of me. So, you're angry and a bit embarrassed too, aren't you? Please listen to what I'm saying. No need to listen. I understand it all. You were lonely, weren't you? You're sulking because only your sister got all the attention, right? But deep down, you're happy to see your parents, aren't you? Stop creating your own story. Don't worry, from now on, we'll be proper parents and stay by your side. I had no idea what he was talking about. Could it be that my father is already showing signs of dementia? For a moment, I stared blankly at my parents, and their ridiculous expressions made me burst out laughing. Why are you laughing? Is it because you're happy? Haha, not at all. Just so you know, in the past 10 years, I never once thought about either of you. Thanks to my uncle, I had a fulfilling life. As my parents stared at me in shock from my sudden laughter, I continued to speak. Actually, I received a scholarship to graduate from university. Oh, really? Then you must have gotten into a good company. Yes, I did. I got a job at a well-known big corporation. That's great to hear. And through an unexpected connection, I also got married. Oh, well, then I have to meet the groom and give my greetings. No, that won't be necessary. No, it's only proper that I should. That's impossible. He's currently overseas. Oh, I see. Wait, what? By the way, Uncle is also overseas. What? Your uncle too? I thought you were living here alone. I figured your sickly uncle had already. Don't go assuming my uncle is dead. He got a job assignment abroad, and since it's in a place with a good environment for his health, he went along. Now he's happily spending time playing with my kids. You have kids too. My parents were almost too stunned to process all the surprises I was throwing at them. With their bewilderment on full display, I smiled brightly. At first, Uncle wasn't keen on living together with us, but he eventually agreed. Now we're all living happily as one family. Well, in that case, we could move overseas too. Sure, go ahead. But we won't live together, and I won't be taking care of you. You're free to do what you want with your own money. That's impossible. Are you really going to abandon your parents? You're the ones who abandoned me first. My patience finally snapped at their selfish demands. My parents' faces turned pale. I have no gratitude toward you for anything, but I owe a great deal to my uncle. From now on, I intend to repay him for all he's done for me. That may be so, but at least send us a little money, please." Uncle never touched the money I sent him and continued to live in this old apartment the whole time. But now, he's finally agreed to leave here and live with us overseas. I'm just here to finalize the paperwork. What? On the very last day of leaving this shabby apartment, the fact that you two show up, what a coincidence. Wait, what? You're leaving. The process is already done. I'm just returning the keys and then I'll head back to our home overseas. What about us? Are you just going to leave your mother and me behind? My father asked in shock, and I nodded clearly. Thank you for abandoning me. I said that with a smile, leaving them speechless. Truly thank you. Because of you, I'm happy now. With those words, I walked past them. How does it feel to be abandoned by the daughter you once threw away? I asked one last time, but there was no response. Without waiting for an answer, I left. It felt like this was the final goodbye to my real parents. After that, I returned to my home overseas. Throughout my life with Uncle, I worked hard and persevered. That effort paid off, and I secured a job at a reputable company. Later, I got an opportunity to work abroad, and it was there that I met the man I married. Uncle shed tears of joy as he celebrated our union. Soon we had children, and we invited Uncle to join us, and now we're all happily living together as a family. My husband, our children, and of course Uncle too. And I hope I can meet someone wonderful like you did, Big Sis said my sister, who stood beside me, smiling as she watched the kids play in the garden. Don't worry, you'll find someone great. You're finally free from our parents' control, I reassured her with a smile. That being said, I really need to get used to this new job, my sister said. Why not try getting a law license in this country, I suggested. I'm not interested in being a lawyer. I've had enough of doing what our parents wanted. I want to take on a job that I truly want to do, she replied. You're right, I agreed. Right after our parents abandoned me, a letter from my sister arrived at my uncle's house. In it, she described how she was suffering under the excessive expectations and pressure from our parents. After discussing it with my uncle, we secretly arranged to meet my sister on her way home from school. We kept in touch without our parents knowing. My sister wanted to live with us, but with my uncle's financial situation, it was impossible for him to support both of us. More than that, our parents would never allow it, so my sister endured living with them until she became an adult and could plan her escape. It was a tough ordeal, but she overcame it and finally gained her freedom. While our parents were distracted, celebrating her success as a lawyer, she moved out and became independent. Of course, I was there to help her. Although she secured a job here, she's struggling to adapt to the new language and environment, but I'm sure she'll be fine. There's no one more resilient and hardworking than my sister, who withstood the strict upbringing of our parents, so she'll adapt quickly. On the other hand, although I was worried about Uncle said he's planning to attend a language school, I told her, and she nodded with a smile. That's great. It's never too late to learn. His health has improved a lot, so we should enjoy life more now. You're absolutely right. Our parents quickly ran out of money after they selfishly squandered the inheritance. Even though they continued to invest in my sister, they eventually lost their jobs. When they sold the house, they were left with very little, as it was tied up with home improvement loans. They've been asking relatives for financial help, but everyone has responded coldly, leaving them to live in poverty. I heard from a relative that arguments between them are constant. I believe there should never be favoritism between siblings or unfair treatment of one's children, I said, reflecting on the past. You're absolutely right. Once again, my sister nodded in agreement with my words. No matter what happens, I'll always be here to support you, Sandy. You've already done more than enough. Thank you so much, big sis. Seeing how much my sister had grown brought tears to my eyes at that moment. What do you mean by support? Suddenly, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It felt slightly smaller than before, but still warm. I turned around, squinting as I smiled. Thank you. Huh? As I turned, I saw my uncle standing there, looking surprised at my words. I smiled warmly and said, "Thank you, Dad. I love you."
Witnessing my husband's selfish claim over the house of my late father, with whom we were living, as he declares, "I'm going to make my father-in-law's house mine. Can you really not understand anything?" My husband's shallow remark made me laugh beyond surprise. Seeing my long underestimated husband's family cornered by my retaliation. I, Katie Manning, had been living with my father and my husband, Ben. Since my mother passed away when I was in high school, my father raised me with endless love. My deep affection for my father remains unchanged. When I proposed living with my increasingly worrisome father to Ben, he warmly welcomed the idea of us living together in our home. "Are you really okay with this?" "I can manage on my own," my father asked me anxiously, a concern stemming from our cohabitation proposal. When I suggested living together, he initially smiled happily but soon looked worried. "I am always worried I might be a burden to you." My father always considered my feelings. However, after I expressed my desire to stay with him and Ben agreed, my father accepted with a smile. Today, Ben and I are moving into my childhood home. We began unpacking the boxes brought by the movers. "Again with this? Haven't I always said this is what I wanted?" "You're right, Dad. Plus, this place has better access to work, which is also convenient for me." We explained, and my father nodded with a faint smile. After unpacking, we found my father had prepared coffee for us. I was about to take a coffee break when I heard footsteps coming downstairs. "I thought you might want a break, so I prepared some for you too." Grateful for the warm hospitality, Ben and I enjoyed a break with him, feeling happy about the enriched life that lay ahead. After a short rest, we resumed unpacking, rolling up our sleeves for another push. "Hey, if you want, you can quit your job. It's okay to stay and support your father." During the work, Ben made a surprising proposal, pausing me in astonishment. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Moving back here, we've cut down on our rent expenses, right? If you quit your job, taking care of your father and having fewer worries might be better, right? Currently, both of us work, with me mainly handling household chores. Though Ben helps sometimes, our days are still quite busy." I mulled over Ben's suggestion, feeling delighted at the prospect of spending more time with my father. Moreover, focusing on household chores seemed like it would reduce both mental and physical stress. Ben's proposal was very appealing, but it meant becoming financially dependent on him, which worried me. Grateful for his acceptance of the cohabitation, I pondered whether I should rely on Ben further. With a change of living environment, we decided to continue as before for now. Ben said, "I don't want you to overdo it, but the cohabitation proposal was mine." I felt I couldn't always depend on Ben. A month has passed. "Hey, maybe quitting your job for your father's sake is the best after all." When Ben suggested this again, I also thought it might be the best course of action. Living together turned out to lighten my daily load unexpectedly, mainly because my father took on household chores. Returning home, I found my father had already prepared dinner or cleaned the house. Yet, this seemed to increase his burden, making me feel guilty and contemplate quitting my job to take over the chores. Yeah, I might do that. I feel bad putting financial pressure on you, Ben. What are you thinking? There's no need to worry about that. Hearing those words, I made up my mind to quit my job. When I told my father about this decision, he urged me to continue working and leave the household chores to him. But after expressing my desire to help with the chores, he understood. As a result, I chose to quit my job and dedicate myself to our home, leading to more fulfilling days spent with my father. However, gradually, changes began to appear in our lives. I'm home. Welcome back, Ben. It must have been a tough day. Yo, is dinner ready? Ben's return home became later, and by the time he got back, my father was already asleep, decreasing the opportunities for us to eat together. Today, I was watching TV with Dad, but can you keep it down? I'm eating. Oh, sorry. When my father is nearby, Ben is as kind as he used to be, but lately, when it's just the two of us, he becomes quite cold. I feel like my quitting the job has added stress on him, and all I can do is apologize. After Ben finishes his dinner, I start to prepare his favorite evening drink, but he gets up to leave the dining area. Where are you going? What about your drink? I'm going to take a bath. He answered shortly and left, closing the door behind him with a bang. Whether he's in a bad mood or simply tired, these days leave me unable to help but sigh. The next day, I wait for Ben's return after my father has gone to sleep, but even past midnight, he hasn't come home. Worried, I try calling him but get no response. Just as I start to panic, thinking something has happened, an email arrives. What? The cold text of the email seemed to convey his feelings. Despite sighing, I felt relieved that he was safe. Still at work? I was worried because it's late. I replied, and his response came quickly. On a business trip. Those few words let me know he wouldn't be coming home tonight. I hadn't been informed about the trip, and I wish he had told me sooner, but expressing that might only irritate him further. So, you're on a business trip. Got it. How long will you be away? I sent this message, but no reply came. After that, Ben's business trips became more frequent, and he stopped telling me when he would leave or return home. My father, trying to be considerate, would ask about the situation when Ben was home, and he would answer with a cheerful smile that no longer seemed directed at me. No problem, I'm working hard for our family. Seeing his reaction made me feel like he was dissatisfied with me, and though I suggested we talk, he would say, I'm just busy or I'm tired. Let's talk later, and we never had a serious discussion. Eventually, Ben rarely returned home. Amidst growing distrust, I began to suspect he might be having an affair when I unexpectedly received a message from my mother-in-law. I need the address of the company Ben works for. A one-line email without any greetings. My in-laws have not been fond of me since the beginning of our marriage, throwing harsh words and malicious actions my way, leading to a natural distance between us. Ben understood this situation, and although it never worsened our relationship due to my in-laws' issues, it didn't improve either, and we continued to keep our distance. Receiving this sudden email from my mother-in-law, I pondered its intent before replying. It's been a while. May I know why you need Ben's work address? After sending this reply, it seemed she was indeed upset, as I immediately received an angry call. Hello, it's been a while. It's been a while. You've made Ben take care of your father and quit your job to do nothing at home. How can you do such a thing? Because of you, he's now returned to our house. He forgot his lunchbox today and went to the office, so I'm trying to deliver it. What are you going to do about this attitude? It's unforgivable. Give me the address right away. And from now on, Ben will be living at our house. Shocked by my mother-in-law's angry words, I was left speechless. It turned out that the days Ben claimed to be away on business trips, he had actually returned to his parents' home. Learning how my in-laws spoke about me was deeply shocking. It was Ben who said it would be okay for me to quit my job, yet I couldn't help but feel his true intentions were different. Overwhelmed with sadness, I felt like I couldn't stop my tears. Without arguing, I simply provided Ben's work address and ended the call. Trying to calm myself, I made some coffee in the living room when my father came in. Asking him if he would like some coffee with a smile as usual, he looked at me, smiled back, and accepted. As we enjoyed our coffee, my father started talking about the past. Your mom and I used to argue a lot when we were young. There were many misunderstandings, but we always tried to be honest with each other, and that's how we solved many issues. Couples who can argue and then fix their relationship might understand each other better and become stronger, he said warmly. His words deeply resonated with me, and I decided to have a serious conversation with Ben. That's true, Dad? Thank you, I told him, and he responded with a kind smile. Afterward, I sent an email to Ben outlining the facts from my conversation with his mother and expressing my desire to talk. However, Ben replied dismissively, making me sigh deeply. Anger towards Ben began to build inside me. I wanted to respond immediately in my emotional state, but took a deep breath to calm myself. This situation led to Ben stopping his contributions to our household finances. Attempts to contact him were met with silence, and messages about living expenses were ignored. My love for him gradually faded due to his selfish behavior. Finding no meaning in our marriage, thoughts of divorce crossed my mind. I was disappointed in Ben for being so irresponsible and self-centered. However, not wanting to worry my father further, I decided to postpone discussions about divorce and support myself using my savings from before we were married. Getting used to Ben's absence, I enjoyed my days with my father until he suddenly fell ill. Rushed to the hospital, we were told he didn't have much time left. Overwhelmed and unable to stop my tears, I couldn't hear the doctors or nurses. Visiting my father's room, he tried to smile and apologized for worrying me. Holding his hand, I smiled back, saying, "Don't worry, you'll get better," despite my eyes swelling with tears. Seeing my father, who looked sad despite laughing and asking, "What's with that face?" I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. Because hospitalization was necessary, I temporarily returned home to prepare what was needed. However, upon returning to my childhood home alone, I was overwhelmed by a sense of loneliness, and I couldn't stop my tears. This house, where I grew up since I was a child. Even though I had left it when I got married, this place is filled with countless memories. Unable to bear the loneliness of being alone, I simply cried incessantly. During this difficult time, I received a cold message from Ben. "Since we're living separately, handle your own expenses. Maybe use your father-in-law's pension?" Reading this, I threw my phone in frustration. All my feelings for Ben vanished at that moment. Shaken by anger and sorrow, I realized dwelling on my feelings for Ben was a waste. Wondering how my father would feel seeing me like this calmed my mind. Regaining my composure, I washed my face and prepared to leave for the hospital. Just then, I received mail containing good news that could change my current situation. Seeing this, I made up my mind. Leaving the documents at home for now, I hurried to the hospital. My father's condition worsened gradually, and I had to accept that our time to say goodbye was nearing. Days passed with joyous conversations at the hospital, only to return home to tears. Eventually, my father passed away peacefully. I was there to witness his serene departure, but the sense of loss overwhelmed me, leaving me in tears. However, the legacy my father left was immeasurable and deeply etched in my heart. The funeral, with the help of relatives, went smoothly, but Ben and my in-laws did not show up until the end. I hadn't specifically informed them about my father's passing, so I hadn't expected them to attend. Nonetheless, it seemed they had learned of his death through relatives because, a few days after settling the estate and paperwork, Ben suddenly appeared with a lot of luggage. "It's been a while. I heard your father passed away." Seeing Ben's face stirred anger within me, but I suppressed the impulse and took a deep breath to remain calm. "What do you want? What's with the luggage? Isn't that a bit harsh for a husband returning home?" "Oh, this luggage is my parents' stuff." "Huh?" The fact that Ben used the word husband was profoundly irritating. His words made no sense to me. After he had left the house, stopped providing for living expenses, and lived as he pleased, claiming now to be a husband was beyond surprising. It was appalling. I was at a loss for words. "Were you waiting for me? Jobless, struggling with living expenses, and left alone to care for your father? Happy, are you? So happy you're speechless?" "No, it seems I was the one caught in your plan." Ben's mention of a plan caught my attention, prompting me to ask for clarification. The answer I received was unbelievable. Living with an old man was something I couldn't accept. Impossible to live with the elderly. But saying that might make you think about divorce. If we divorced, I couldn't get this house. So, I chose to live together and pushed you into unemployment by pretending to be the ideal husband, making you dependent on me and the elderly man. That way, the house would become mine. Hearing his words, I found myself glaring at Ben sharply. This was not normal thinking. Reflecting on our marriage made me despise myself and feel deep guilt towards my father. I struggled to contain my trembling anger. "Your story doesn't add up. You're the one who left and stopped paying the living expenses." When I pointed this out, Ben scratched his head in annoyance. Yeah, I had reached my limit. I didn't realize I was so short-tempered. But I thought the plan would work even without me, assuming you wouldn't have the courage to bring up divorce. His smug smile made me forget what had ever attracted me to him. I no longer wanted to see his face or hear his voice. My feelings towards Ben had become unbearable. The plan worked. This house might be old, but it's spacious and well located. It'll be worth a lot when sold. From today, my parents and I will live here. Could there be anyone more self-centered? It seemed morality was foreign to him, which wasn't surprising considering his parents. As I stood dumbfounded, he continued to insult me further. "The house of your father is mine. Get out." Watching my in-laws' belongings being moved in, I realized Ben was completely oblivious to the situation. Ben looked down on me confidently, disrespecting my father and making it impossible to leave things as they were. Seeing Ben standing there so smugly made me burst into laughter, unable to hold it back. My sudden laughter confused Ben. "Have you lost your mind? That's the perfect description for you." The thought of confronting him with reality made my laughter uncontrollable. Seeing me laugh, Ben became furious. However, ignoring his reaction, I laid out the reality. "Don't you know? This is my house. It could never become yours." Surprised and frozen by my words, I continued. "Besides, you and I are now unrelated. Didn't your mother tell you?" Laughing as I said this, Ben seemed utterly stunned. Then, he immediately started contacting someone on his smartphone, apparently his mother. "What, Mom? Katie's saying something weird. We haven't divorced, have we? She said I hadn't heard anything from you." "What do you mean, you sent it? Really? How did this happen?" Watching Ben's speechless reaction, it seemed he finally grasped the situation. After ending the call, Ben's expression was twisted as if he was looking at something incomprehensible. "Did you really submit a divorce application?" he asked. "Yes, I did. The day your father was taken to the hospital, your mother sent me a completed divorce form by post, which I happily submitted the next day." "Your mother has her moments, doesn't she?" I replied. "Damn it. Even if it arrived, you weren't supposed to submit it." It was something my mother made me write just in case, not intending to actually divorce. Ben was furious. "But you filled it out yourself, didn't you? Whether or not you intended to doesn't matter. I completed the divorce process as you wished, so you should be thanking me," I calmly retorted. Seeing Ben frustrated, I felt a sense of relief inside. The divorce form from my mother-in-law might have been intended as harassment, but for me, wanting a divorce, it was a stroke of luck. Later, Ben anxiously questioned me about property division and the house's ownership, but I dismissed his concerns. It was clear there were no significant assets to divide, so I informed him there was no need for division. I explained that due to the short cohabitation period with my father and the assets being in my father's name at the time of the divorce, they were not subject to division. Ben insisted on a financial demand, claiming even my savings from before marriage should be split, but I informed him his claims had no basis. He turned pale, attempting to argue but only opening and closing his mouth, resembling a fish out of water. Though tempted to mock him, I chose to maintain a mature demeanor and calm myself. Let's send this here. It's problematic for someone to bring their belongings into another person's home uninvited, which clearly constitutes trespassing. If you plan to stay any longer, I'll have to call the police. As I said this, Ben hurriedly gathered his belongings and left. I spread salt at the entrance and prayed to my parents' portraits. This is for the best. I'll become stronger, so please watch over me. Thinking of my parents meeting again in heaven eased my loneliness and lightened my heart. Emboldened by this new resolve, I began looking for a job. It was then that a friend contacted me, knowing I was job hunting, and offered to introduce me to a job that matched my expertise. Thanks to their recommendation, I quickly secured a position after an interview with HR. A few days later, I received a message from Ben. Sorry for being stubborn the other day. Actually, I wanted to start over with you, which is why I came to the house. Finding the message unbelievable, I struggled with how to reply but ultimately decided to ignore it. Yet, Ben continued to send poetic messages like a relentless suitor. Once, we were like the sun and the moon. Days spent longing for you, unreachable, are now behind us. Now, we can be closer. Without your love, I'm nothing. Won't you give me your overflowing love once more? I'll dedicate everything to you. I treasure you more than anything. Our love will last forever. No matter where I am, I'll continue to love you, for your heart is my home. Each time I received these poetic messages, I shared them with colleagues, wondering if they could serve as material for work. Currently working as an illustrator in a cartoon editorial department, these emails sometimes prove to be useful inspiration. Look, the melodramatic stalker is back. It's great to have something to laugh about in tough times. Unknowingly, Ben has become a source of amusement. Feeling only discomfort from his messages, I've been avoiding replying. Amid these days, the doorbell at my home rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw Ben standing outside. I had never expected him to show up in person, so I decided to call the police immediately. Hey, I know you're in there. I can see your car. Please, just listen to me. I'm really in trouble right now. There was talk of moving into this house, so my parents sold their home. Now, I have nowhere to go. Help me. I could hear his voice shouting from outside, but what does that have to do with me? It highlights his recklessness for not correcting the situation the day they misunderstood this house as their own. His emails showed he hadn't given up, but I was merely astonished by his and his family's naive thinking. While the police were convincing Ben to leave, he resisted strongly but was eventually taken away by them. After that, when there was no response to the flood of Romeo emails, contacts from my in-laws began. At first, they tried calling, but when I ignored that, they switched to emails. How can you know we're in a difficult situation and not offer any help? You should contact us immediately. Why not have a serious discussion? We were once a family. Isn't it too cruel to be so indifferent? You caused us to lose our home. Now we live in a dilapidated apartment. Why won't you hand over the house? You must have received inheritance from your father. You're not struggling financially. We quit our jobs. You should take responsibility. If the child is like this, of course, the parents are too. Do they think their decisions will always prevail? I was infuriated by the audacious emails. How can they disregard others to such an extent? Although I intended to ignore them, I ended up blocking Ben and my in-laws' contacts. I considered changing my contact information, but it felt ridiculous to spend money just because of them. I was determined to ignore them, but I reached my limit. I optimistically thought blocking them would restore my peace, but soon realized my approach was short-sighted. One day, my former in-laws showed up at my doorstep. Despite being fed up with their endless harassment, understanding they knew my address made me realize such incidents were inevitable. However, I did not want to leave this house filled with many memories. Come out, you know we're in trouble. Change your mood? I'm proposing we get back together, accept it. How can you ignore someone in trouble? What kind of human does that? The doorbell and knocking were incessant, but I did not hesitate to call the police. Suddenly, the noise from outside stopped. Peeking through the hole, I saw an unfamiliar man arguing with my former in-laws. Go home, you're bothering people. The sudden appearance of the man puzzled my former in-laws. What did you say? Who are you? Could it be an affair partner? Unfazed by their backlash, the man looked at them coldly. Your attitude is the problem. Look around. This is a residential area. Look, people are gathering because of you. You're really causing a disturbance. Indeed, through the limited view of the peephole, I could see neighbors gathering, which felt somewhat embarrassing. However, seeing my former family flustered and stuttering but was when the police arrived. It seemed one of the officers had encountered this scene before, saying to Ben, "It's you guys again." Hearing this, my former in-law's faces turned red. How much trouble are you going to cause? Get some awareness. I silently thanked the man as he walked away, relieved. Afterward, my former in-laws were taken away in a police vehicle, and the onlookers dispersed. Hours later, the doorbell rang again, and peering through the peephole, I saw the man from the earlier argument standing there. Surprised to see him, I hesitated before cautiously opening the door. The man greeted me with a warm smile. "It's been a while. If you were back, you should have let me know." I recognized his face, but I couldn't immediately recall who he was until he reintroduced himself. "Don't tell me you've forgotten. It's been over 10 years, after all. Remember me? I'm Scott." Hearing his name, memories flooded back. Scott, my childhood friend, known as Scotty in our hometown. Scotty. Now that you mention it, you really are Scotty. Scott used to live next door and we hadn't seen each other since changing elementary schools. Finally remembered, I've moved back to the area. We're neighbors again. It's really been a long time. And thank you for earlier. It meant a lot to me. After expressing my gratitude again, Scott just laughed it off, making me smile too. We caught up on old times, and I ended up telling him about the recent disturbances. Scott promised to support me whenever needed, proving to be a reliable friend. When I mentioned my father's passing, Scott offered to pay his respects, remembering him from our childhood. The joy of having someone who shared my past was profound. Days passed, and I received a letter from a law firm out of the blue containing a notification. Opening the unexpected envelope, I found it claimed I had committed infidelity during my marriage, demanding payment for damages. Shocked by the situation, I noticed a message from an unknown email address on my smartphone titled regarding the notification. The message read, "Your ex-husband Ben has initiated a lawsuit claiming marital infidelity on your part. Admitting and dealing with this straightforwardly will avoid escalating the matter. We plan to inform your workplace. Considering your future, we advise settling this matter promptly," suggesting a threat. It was clear this was a scheme by my former in-laws, not a genuine liar's notification. Upon closer inspection, the quality of the notification raised doubts about its authenticity, prompting me to consult a real lawyer. The lawyer confirmed it was a complete forgery, and the supposed attorney's name was not registered, revealing the document as fake. Despite knowing better, I decided to play along in my reply, indicating a willingness to consider their claims but asking for evidence of my supposed infidelity. "The alleged mental anguish suffered by Ben is immense, and we seek compensation for that," they replied, without any tangible proof. Such baseless claims seemed unlikely to involve legal professionals. I assert there was no infidelity on my part, hence no evidence exists. It's hard to believe professionals would intervene based on such unfounded claims, wouldn't you agree? Moved by Ben's passion, we wish to assist him. We expect your sincere cooperation, not intending to escalate this matter further. Quite an emotional approach for a professional. You're aware impersonating a lawyer is illegal and punishable, right? Just to confirm, you do hold legitimate qualifications? This inquiry halted their previously prompt responses. Curious about the next move, I received a new email. "I am indeed a professional. However, your arguments were unbeatable. We've decided to withdraw the lawsuit. No need for withdrawal, as I have no passion for this matter and am entirely calm about being falsely accused of infidelity. I intend to legally counter this. Looking forward to meeting this passionate lawyer in court." After this exchange, all communication ceased. However, the silence did not last long as my former in-laws once again showed up at my house. Despite it being late at night, they started begging loudly at the front door, "We made a mistake. Please spare us from the lawsuit." Awakened by the noise, I checked the time and it was past 1 a.m. Anger at being deprived of sleep reached its peak, and I yelled, "Please be quiet. Stop bothering me." Never having seen me so angry before, my former in-laws couldn't hide their surprise. "If you come any closer and cause more trouble, I won't overlook it." With that declaration and grabbing my father's wooden sword that was at hand, my former in-laws' expressions changed drastically. Especially my former mother-in-law and Ben, who seemed to tremble in fear, whispering, "We're so sorry. You should have changed your actions from the beginning if you were sorry. Never appear before me again. I scolded, and my former mother-in-law nodded with tears in her eyes. Then, the lights of a patrol car caught my eye, heading our way. Due to the late hour, it seemed neighbors had reported them, and my former in-laws were immediately taken away by the arriving officers. They tried to attack me with a wooden sword. My former mother-in-law pointed at me and appealed to the police, but she was taken away. When the police asked me, "Is this true?" I explained the doorbell kept ringing and someone was banging on the door at this hour, so I took the wooden sword for self-defense, to which they nodded understandingly. Scott was by my side and told the police he had witnessed the former in-law's repeated visits. With his testimony, the police deemed the actions malicious and promptly took my former in-laws away, finally restoring peace. The next day, following Scott's advice, I filed a report. With multiple incidents involving the police already, the process went smoothly. Scott mentioned he had noticed the former in-law's assault the previous night and was about to say something when he heard me shouting. According to him, my voice was terrifying. Subsequently, a restraining order was issued against my former in-laws and they never troubled me again. Moreover, someone had recorded the commotion, and the footage ended up on the internet, making them the secret talk of the neighborhood, unable to move due to lack of financial means. It's unclear how they're living now, but they're probably relying on the former in-law's retirement funds. As for me, Scott and I grew closer rapidly, and within a few months of reuniting, he confessed his love and we started dating. Scott always makes me smile, and the time he spent with him is genuinely happy. I feel like this turn of events is a gift from my father, filling me with gratitude.
I'm going to enjoy a trip with my sister using your card. Scott had been secretly talking with his sister a lot lately and had been showing signs of unease at home. I had suspected that they were plotting something besides the trip, and I was right to have prepared in advance. Maybe I should pretend to be surprised a little. What do you mean by using my card? Explain. I already knew that Scott was leaving for a trip today. I was really astounded. If he was planning to set something up, I wish he would have planned a little better. Until now, I've endured whatever came, but I couldn't bear it any longer. I've decided to retaliate and started implementing the plan I had prepared before the trip. It's time for us, who have been oppressed by this corrupt brother and sister, to fight back. By the end of today, I should be able to say goodbye to all misfortunes. He didn't know that someone who was accompanying him on the trip was actually my ally, so he might as well enjoy it. My name is Megan Brown, and I'm a 33-year-old working housewife. I live with my husband Scott in a newly purchased house. After graduating from high school, I immediately started working at my current company, gaining experience and various qualifications for career advancement. At this company, performance and qualifications were evaluated fairly, so I received a managerial position at the age of 21. I'm currently a supervisor, but it seems I was the youngest and quickest to hold such a position at this company. I'm secretly hoping to be promoted to head of the department in the future. One day, several new employees were assigned, including Scott. I was slightly younger than him, but I was his supervisor at work. I was appointed as the trainer for Scott and 2 other newcomers. Megan, you're about our age, right? And you're already a supervisor. Yes, I've been working here since graduating from high school. I think I'm probably a year younger than you. It's amazing that you've worked hard since high school. I really respect you. Back then, he frequently complimented me. After that, Scott actively pursued me, and although I was reluctant at first, I eventually fell in love with him. We went on lovely dinners and drives, and our relationship grew like any other romance, eventually leading to us living together. Over time, Scott's sloppy habits began to show, but I figured it was because he felt comfortable around me, so I accepted it. After living together for a while, he proposed, and discussing future plans like meeting each other's parents and our wedding was a very happy time until Scott suddenly expressed his wishes after marriage. "Megan, I want you to quit your job and take care of our home. I'll work outside, and I want you to protect our home. I'm also thinking about having children soon, and I'm looking forward to our wedding and our own home. We'll have the wedding first, then buy a home. And think about children after that. What do you think?" Scott, that sounds wonderful. I'm not worried about the order, but I am concerned about the costs. Even though we have savings, I don't plan to be a stay-at-home mom, and I intend to take maternity leave when we have a child. That's a concern for sure. But I don't like the idea of you earning more than me. I plan to buy a home after the wedding. What do you think? That might be a tough conversation. I currently earn more. But I think we can manage the wedding and home, so maybe we should think about children a bit later? Let's consider my job situation then. All right, that sounds good. Although I had no intention of quitting my job, I made such suggestions to prevent Scott from complaining indefinitely. Later, we held a pre-wedding meeting with both families, but Scott's sister was absent due to her travel and would meet me for the first time on the wedding day. On the day of the wedding, Scott's sister entered the bride and groom's waiting room without knocking and looked me up and down, snorting with laughter. "Hayden, Scott's choice of girls is plain, isn't it? She's completely different from his usual type." "Oh, I'm Hillary. Nice to meet you. I'll be your sister-in-law from now on. I don't hold back within the family." "Nice to meet you. I'm Megan Brown. I look forward to getting along with you." She ignored my greeting and just waved her hand and left, leaving me standing there in shock. She would later prove to be a troublesome figure. I also exchanged greetings with her husband, who gave a decent impression. After the wedding, as Scott wished, we went to view a house. We selected a house that both agreed on and purchased it, renewing our commitment to our work and our future life together. One holiday, when our newlywed life was finally settling down, the sudden ring of the doorbell caught me off guard, and I asked Scott to answer it. He returned to the room chatting happily, and the unexpected visitor was his sister. "Hello, Megan. And wow, Scott, you're doing great. You're working hard enough to buy such a lovely house. You really are my brother." "Right? I'm working hard. Think of this as your family home and relax. Megan, get some snacks and food ready. My sister is here, so hurry up." His sister's visit made him act more arrogantly than usual, and I felt somewhat uncomfortable with his attitude. It seemed he was telling his sister that he had bought the house by himself. In fact, I contributed the down payment, and I was also paying the mortgage, but Scott insisted on putting the house under his name, so I let him do so. Whose name it was under didn't matter much to me, but explaining that to his sister was a bit irritating. However, I thought it was childish to point it out right then, so I let it go to save Scott's face. "Here are some snacks. Scott really does work hard." "Megan, you sound so bossy. Are you his boss or something?" "Yes, I am Scott's boss." "Right, didn't I mention it?" When I joined, Megan was already a supervisor because she had been working there since high school. Well, it's only a matter of time before I surpass her. "Oh, you're a high school grad? You seem so serious, but your education is lower than mine." "Is there a problem with being a high school graduate?" "No problem at all. but it's nice that you're younger than me, and since you're a high school grad and I'm a college grad, I can ask for favors." "Exactly. Megan, if you defy what my sister says, I'll kick you out of the house." Their incomprehensible statements gave me a headache. Does my position as a high school graduate and being younger than my sister-in-law mean that any request from her gets approved? Moreover, the idea that not obeying would get me kicked out of the house was baffling. Could this be a joke? I managed a wry smile and hurried to the kitchen. Their conversation still reached my ears while I was there. It seemed they were serious. When the conversation paused, my sister-in-law came to the kitchen. "Megan, I have a favor to ask." "What is it?" "I need to borrow some money." "How much are you talking about?" "About $5,000. Please." $5,000? That's not a small amount. What do you need it for? Oh yeah, I'm short for some renovations. It's just $5,000, right? You're a supervisor, so you have a good salary. Isn't your home new? Did I say that? Whatever. Just give it to me. Scott told me to ask you because he said you'd lend it to me. What? How dare you? Megan, just hand over the money to my sister. If you don't, I'll call your boss right now and tell them you want to quit. All right, I understand. But Hillary, if I'm lending you the money, you need to write a promissory note. A promissory note? Even though we're family. Especially because we're family, I want you to write it. Please bring an ID with a photo when I give you the money. How troublesome. But if I'm getting the money, fine. I'll bring it tomorrow night, so be ready. I ended up agreeing to lend money to my sister-in-law, but due to a bad feeling, I decided to have her write a promissory note to ensure repayment. Despite complaining, she brought the necessary items as promised the next day. After getting married, I was truly shocked by Scott's attachment to his sister, and I was simply dumbfounded. It seemed no matter what I said, he wouldn't listen. Later, it turned out that the money I lent my sister-in-law wasn't used for renovations, but for buying luxury brands. Once I started lending her money, her demands escalated, and the frequency of her borrowing money increased. Of course, I always made her sign a promissory note, but I had lent her about $12,000 in just 1 month. Just as I was thinking that this was too much, I was called by my boss, and to my surprise, I was offered a promotion to be a director, which really made me happy. I couldn't contain my excitement and immediately went home to tell Scott, who was on leave. I'm home. Hey Scott, listen. Welcome back, Megan. You look happy. What happened? Yes. I was called by my boss today. I thought it was something serious, but they talked about promoting me to director. I've always wanted to become the head of the department, and I'm so happy to be one step closer. What? Megan? You're getting promoted? I don't know what you're thinking, but did you really accept that? Yes, of course. Haven't I talked about this goal before? Well, I heard about it, but you need my permission before you get promoted. What are you thinking? I told you I wanted you to be a housewife. And why is it that I'm still a regular employee and only you are getting promoted? That's not right. Why you can't get promoted, I don't know. But I've always said I'm not quitting my job. After this exchange, Scott immediately made a phone call. I thought he was calling his sister, And sure enough, a few minutes later, she arrived at our house. "What have you done?" "You stole Scott's promotion." "No, I haven't taken anything. Our company promotes based on ability." "Are you saying Scott lacks ability? How dare you act so high and mighty as a daughter-in-law?" "This is impossible. She's so irritating. Let's go eat steak with Megan's money to calm down." The two of them started rummaging through my wallet, and despite my desperate resistance, they overpowered me and took my bank card. They left laughing, and I couldn't stop the tears of frustration. Regretting marrying into this family was too late now. I had to find a divorce lawyer immediately. That day, Scott didn't return home. The next day, when I went to work, Scott was already there, grinning as he approached me. Yesterday was incredibly fun. Food tastes better when it's paid for with someone else's money. Thanks. The receipt he handed me showed $1,200 at a high-end steak restaurant and a total of $6,000 including receipts from nightclubs. I wanted to retort, but as employees started arriving, I couldn't say anything. After work, I rushed to the bank to check my account and found that $8,000 had been withdrawn. Feeling my face heat up with anger, I confronted Scott at home. "Scott, what have you done? High-end steak, nightclubs, you spent $8,000 of the money I saved when I was single. Shut up already. I don't care whether it was money you saved when you were single. I've already spent it, so there's nothing you can do about it." With that, Scott escaped to the bathroom. I couldn't bear it anymore. At that moment, I firmly resolved to get divorced. To initiate divorce mediation, I headed to a law firm over the weekend. Weeks flew by and preparations for the divorce were steadily progressing. Since that incident, Scott often came home late at night and left the house early on weekends, exhibiting suspicious behavior. Just as I was considering hiring a detective, I received a call from Hillary's husband, Ethan. "Hello, this is Ethan, Hillary's husband. May I speak with Megan, please?" "Hello, Ethan. It's been a while. What's the matter?" "It's been a while indeed. Sorry to bother you suddenly, but I can't seem to find Hillary and was wondering if she might be with you." "Hillary? She hasn't come over." "Is that so? Recently she's been coming home late, and she leaves without saying anything on weekends. Yesterday, when I asked where she was, she said she was at Scott's place, so I decided to call you." "Is that so?" "Actually, Scott has been acting similarly. They might be going somewhere together. It's a matter that's becoming irrelevant to me now. But there's something I'd like to tell you, Ethan. Can you keep listening?" "Becoming irrelevant?" "Understood. What happened?" I explained everything about the past events and the amount of money I lent to my sister-in-law. After listening, Ethan let out a big sigh and said, "I see. I'm really sorry for my wife's behavior. I've been at my limit as well and was considering divorce, but I just couldn't make up my mind. If it helps, you're welcome to use the evidence I've collected. Why don't you join me in getting a divorce? It's pitiful to let this continue. We need to show those selfish and untrustworthy siblings a lesson." "Thank you. Let's do our best together. Actually, I suspect that Hillary and Scott might be planning a trip." Ethan then shared that he had been asked to take a long break and mentioned finding travel brochures on the dressing table. While still on the phone, I checked a shelf that Scott had kept me from accessing and found travel brochures and business cards from nightclubs, confirming their plans. "Ethan, I found brochures here as well. They seem to be planning a trip. I have an idea." After sharing my plan, Ethan agreed with a laugh. We decided to keep in touch via messages to plan further steps and ended the call. I sent him evidence favorable for the divorce and crafted a perfect plan. One morning about 2 weeks later, I noticed Scott leaving the house before dawn. However, I had been warned by Ethan the day before, so I was prepared for Scott's actions. A few hours later, Scott called, sounding triumphant. "I'm going to enjoy a trip with my sister, using your card." Scott had been secretly talking with his sister a lot lately and had been showing signs of unease at home. I had suspected that they were plotting something besides the trip, and I was right to have prepared in advance. Maybe I should pretend to be surprised a little. "What do you mean by using my card? Explain." "Wait, you really didn't notice? You're so clueless. I've been planning this trip with my sister for a long time. To make sure everything went smoothly, we decided to have Ethan come along. Recently, you have been getting too carried away. And my sister said we need to teach you a lesson. It's 3 against 1, you don't stand a chance. Now you understand, right? You can't oppose us. I think I don't have to put up with this any longer, right? Having been insulted and having endured so much until now, a bit of retaliation seemed justified. I had no more feelings for them." "Sorry, Scott, I didn't quite catch you. Could you repeat that?" "You must be shocked and didn't hear me, huh? I'll tell you again then. I'm using your cash card to go on a trip." "What?" "The card is in my wallet, though." "What are you talking about?" "I have it here." "Wait, what is this?" "Did you just realize?" "That's a bit slow of you, Scott. I think what you took was my old fitness club membership card. They have similar designs, easy to mix up." "No way. I checked and made sure it was the cash card. It really says fitness club." "Mistook it, did you?" "Hey, I heard everything. Explain yourself. It was definitely a cash card when I saw it." "Was it now? If Hillary knew, it means you two conspired to steal the cash card from my wallet again, doesn't it? You see, I switched my bank card and the membership card last night, and you went all the way to New York without checking." "What? This is the worst. What have you done?" "That's my line. Sorry it didn't go as you two planned." "How dare you be so presumptuous? Remember this when you get home." "That's fine. I've prepared a gift for you two, so look forward to returning home." "Trying to bribe me with things? I only accept cash." "That will be a surprise for when you get home." "But sis, what do we do now? Megan, send us money." I found their conversation worthless, so I hung up and decided to go back to sleep as it was still early in the morning. But soon, a message from Scott arrived. "Megan, send money right now. Ethan is here." I replied simply, "Is that so?" and went back to sleep. In the afternoon, I was woken up by the ringing of my phone. Checking the display, I saw an unusual number of missed calls and messages. As the phone kept ringing, I decided to call Ethan first, then answer Scott's call. "Finally, you picked up your phone. You're late. Please send money quickly. We're freezing here." It's February, and they were in New York, which must have been very cold. Why don't you ask Ethan for help? Oh, isn't he there? You definitely know something. Ethan has disappeared, so help us, now. I'll let you know then. Since you and Hillary were conspiring, I teamed up with Ethan. The initial call was just to buy time for Ethan to get back. I hung up after receiving a message that he had boarded the plane home. He should be arriving soon. Do you understand the situation? You were conspiring with my husband. No, we were cooperating to take revenge on you too, so now you'll have to manage on your own. Goodbye. With that, I ended the call. Ethan would be arriving soon. To discuss future actions, I contacted a lawyer to come over. We conducted the final meeting for the divorce before Scott and Hillary returned home. The reason why I gathered Ethan and the lawyer was because I anticipated that Scott and his sister would definitely come to confront us. A few hours later, just as expected, they returned and immediately started shouting. Hey, Megan. You've really done it now. Prepare yourself because I'm going to kick you out of this house. Ethan, why did you come back alone? Are you okay with being abandoned by me? Shut up. Just sit down. Ethan, usually calm, raised his voice, causing Scott and his sister to sit down in shock. At that moment, the lawyer took out his business card and handed it to Scott and Hillary. They stared blankly at the card. Here is our gift to you. Please read it carefully. Ethan and I handed them a stack of documents. As they reluctantly began to read, their faces quickly turned pale. Wait a minute. This mentions compensation. But you're not seriously saying you want to divorce me, are you? My documents say the same thing. Yes, we are getting divorced. Did I do something wrong? Divorce must be a joke. I think so too. Ethan, let's go home together, okay? Including the calls during the trip, all the verbal abuse you've spewed daily has been recorded from a certain point. You really don't understand what you have done, huh? I've endured mental anguish from your emotional abuse, so I can't stay married to you any longer. Are you really okay with this? Of course. I will also claim half of the down payment and mortgage for the house, as well as the money you spent from my savings when I was single. I will have Hillary repay the money I loaned her and the money spent together with Scott. Wait, no. Didn't Scott buy the house? And stop making up things about borrowing and spending. Hillary, please read the documents we provided. They include all the promissory notes for the money I lent you. I won't acknowledge these documents without proof. I'll just do this. Me too. Give me that voice recorder. Scott forcibly took the recorder from me and crushed it, and his sister tore up the documents and threw them away. Then they glared at us with a triumphant expression. Scott, do you really think destroying that will erase the data on the computer? The same goes for you, Hillary. No matter how much you tear up those documents, they're not the originals, so you're just wasting your energy. What? Really, such shallow thinking. I will also claim the savings you misused from you, Hillary. By the way, say hello to your favorite guy from the nightclub from me. Perhaps realizing their defeat, the two started wailing like children. The claims against Scott included $5,000 in compensation, $100,000 for half of the house down payment, and another $10,000 for additional expenses, totaling $115,000. Additionally, he would need to pay $2,000 for ongoing mortgage repayments. My claim against Hillary included $8,000 for misused funds and $23,000 for the promissory notes, totaling $31,000. Ethan claimed $30,000 from his wife for her infidelity and nightclub expenses, along with $90,000 for other misuses, totaling $120,000 without any property division. Both lacked basic understanding and might have thought about rushing to court. However, the lawyer had noted at the end of the documents, "Filing a lawsuit will only incur additional costs, and you have no chance of winning in court. It would be wise to focus on repayment," thus concluding the discussion. Afterwards, I packed up all my belongings and left the house. Scott's actions somehow became known at his company, and having lost his credibility, he was transferred to another branch. Only a few weeks had passed when Scott contacted me again. "Megan, I really want to see you. I never thought I'd feel so lonely without you. Is there a chance we could start over? You can keep working as much as you like." "Sorry, but no. Goodbye." Megan. "It's Hillary. I also think you should start over with my brother. Maybe there was some misunderstanding between us, and I'm sure we can do better next time. Let's live together this time." "Hillary, I firmly refuse. Sorry, but I hope I never have to see you again." They pleaded, but I ignored all of it, blocking their contacts and setting up call rejections. Ethan received similar messages, but he responded in the same way. Later, when I passed by the old house in a taxi, it had already been put up for sale. Since I had demanded the repayments in a lump sum, I completely cut off contact with them, leaving their current situation unknown to me. I myself bought a new apartment after moving out. With the stress gone, my work went well, and I recently received a notification from my boss about my promotion to head of the department. Ethan and I often went out to eat, and despite the age difference, his calm demeanor and gentle nature always brought a smile to my face. Our thoughts were similar, and I felt I had a good connection with him. After the divorce, my life has been bright and everything has been going well. Every day I am truly glad I decided to divorce. Well, what happened next between Ethan and me will remain a story for another time.